Hello, 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 and welcome to today's episode of Her Version. This podcast is dedicated to sharing struggles, stories of struggle and triumph, a platform that allows individuals to tell their truth in order to inspire and uplift others. For those of you that are new to this podcast and like content like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button, follow, like, and share. My name is Sabrina Victoria. Let's jump right in. Thank you for joining us today for this episode of Her Version. We already have a few people jumping on live. Hello and welcome. The Her Version platform is built on storytelling and the understanding that many times our greatest learning experiences come from listening to other people's stories. Today, I'm speaking with an amazing woman named Wilda Previl. I love that name. At 30 years old, Wilda started questioning everything in her life. Why did she have no money? Why did she not have a big house? Why does she have nothing? She started making huge changes in her life, pivoted, and now believes that the story you are most ashamed of is the story you need to be sharing. This girl gets my mission in life. So excited to have Wilda here today. Welcome, lady. How are you?
I am so excited. I'm here. I'm like, let's talk, let's dish, because I feel like today's topic is going to help people to see how it is that they can share their story in a way that feels authentic in the most in a really different way.
Yes. And when you and I first talked, I remember listening to you just say that. You're like, I was looking around and I'm like, I have nothing. Why do I have nothing? And I think that this is so important because I think most people do have that point in their life where they're looking around and they're like, why am I here? And like other people are here. And then some people like yourself are like, I'm making some changes. And then other people are like, I guess this is just where I belong. So I kind of want to dive into like, what's the difference? Like, what was the catalyst that was like, move in that direction to be able to do all of that stuff. So I'm super excited to kind of dive in and hear about all the things. Before we do that, tell us where you're from. Married, not married, kids. What do you got going on?
So all the things, right? ASL from AOL days, right? Age, sex, location. So I am 40, and I am a married Miami mom to 5 minions. I love saying that. And born and raised in Miami. And my parents are from the beautiful island of Haiti. And I've been here all my life. I've traveled to a few places, but I love it here. I love South Florida.
Fantastic. How old are your children? Like young to old? Like,
oh man, so the oldest is 8, right? The oldest is 8, and she started me off on this journey, and you're going to hear a little bit about that in just a minute. And then I have twins. I have twin boys. So the first is a girl, and then I have twin boys. One of them has special needs, and then I have another girl. She's 5, and then the baby is 3. So 5 kids, literally from 3 to 5 years old, 5 years apart. I was busy, literally.
Yes. Holy how. That is awesome. I absolutely love it. Very, very cool. And you're going to have so much like joy as they grow up and all the, I only have one. So, my whole thing is just, and he's amazing. Like he was like, good. He's a good kid.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've never had the dynamic of like fighting and bickering and like, my family and I, there was 3 of us. My mom, I remember this several times, she had to actually put tape down the center of like rooms or cars because it'd always be like, she's on my side.
Oh man, I have it every day. Oh God, it's like every day. My role is, it's not so much mom, it's more like referee, because it's always who's fighting, who's kicking, who's not sharing, who doesn't want to play with me. And it's literally just, I've always had an affinity for teachers, but now that I'm a mom, I'm like, God, just give them the world, because are you serious? It's ridiculous. Referee more than anything.
Yes. Every age brings its own dynamic. That's
Yeah.
so fun. I love it. Well, I want to ask, to kind of just dive in, let's just go to the deep end. I kind of want to just ask, what was the story that changed your entire life? Where did it pivot? And
Man.
what did you learn from the story?
So I believe that we all around the same age have this need for what I call maturing and growing up. It looks different for all of us, whether you're wanting to settle and get married. And when I say settle, it's not for the worst or anything, but you want to, create roots for yourself, right? And so you want to plant seeds. And so that can look like getting married. That can look like taking your career serious. That can and getting into a specific industry. That can look like having children. That can look like moving out of your home if you haven't already. Most Americans, we're pretty, like, listen, I'm 18, I'm out of here type of thing. But around that age, you really just want to grow up a little bit. And I didn't know it then, and we can touch upon this a little bit later, but I was going through something called the Saturn Return. And I won't get into the details too much right now until, a little bit later and explain what that is. But basically, it was a point of time in my life where I was being asked to grow up. And I didn't know quite what that looked like. But at about the age of 31, I had become pregnant with my first child, right? And so I waited this long and I thought, surely I'd feel better about it, but I didn't because I looked around. And as you mentioned, I'm like, well, I'm 30. Where's my money? where's, where's the money that was supposed to suddenly fall out of the sky that I didn't really work for? Where is the mansion? Where's the BMW? Where's the Mercedes? Where is, this really glamorous life that I saw depicted on television that happened, Sex and the City style, that didn't happen for me. I'm like, someone lied. Like, what? Maybe I lied to myself, but certainly there was a lie somewhere in there. And so I got really scared and I thought, I can't believe that God would make me a mother. I'm not ready. And I don't know what I'm going to do, but here I am wanting, right, to explore being a mother. And so I was working for Enterprise at the time, and I was making okay money. I think at the time I was making either between $39,000 and $42,000 a year. My husband was making a little bit more than that, and so we were okay. But I certainly thought that's not enough. I need to make more because I have so many things that I want to do. And so when it really
Especially living in South Florida.
okay, and I'm like, we were living in an efficiency at the time, and I'm like, okay, now I have to buy a house, and what does that look like? And I just had so many swirling things that was going on, all the things, right, that you go through in adulthood and around that time or something like that. And so I sat down with myself one day and I thought, like, I looked at my life, because hindsight is 2020 and so is all the things. And I looked at all the patterns and I'm like, God, there was always this pattern of stopping and starting and stopping and starting. And I had never really completed or materialized anything up until that point. And life really just sat me down when I became a mom. And I asked a really deep life question that most of us really, face ourselves. And I thought, God, what the fuck is wrong with me? And so I just had to figure that out. Like, what is wrong with me? I need to finally sit down with myself. And so I was forced to, because I became a mom. And I went on the quest of asking myself, what is wrong with me? Why had this pattern been so pervasive in my life? I need to figure it out. And I did.
So what were the steps? Like, so you're sitting down, you have this like, oh, I have to do something.
Yeah.
Then what did you do? Did you read a book? Did you go someplace?
I read
Did
all
you
the books.
educate
I
yourself? Did you
went all the
ask your
places.
mom? What did you do? Okay.
I didn't quite ask my mom. I'm like, I got to figure this out, because I knew that everybody's life looked a little bit different, right? Everybody had their own thing, but I needed to figure out me. I felt like before I could go out and ask anyone else, even if it were my mom, right? And I read all the books. I read Rich Dad Poor Dad. I read Awakening the Giant Within, Millionaire Next Door, Who Moved My Cheek. I mean, you name it, I probably read it, or I have it here, right? I went down YouTube University. I went to the conferences. I did all the things that I could possibly do within my wheelhouse of understanding of life's development, right? And trying to understand, why did my life amount to what what it was. And it wasn't so much a woe is me. It's more like, why is me, if anything else. And so somehow, some way, till this day, I still don't quite remember the day that it actually fell into my lap. But there's a woman by the name of Chani Nicholas who changed my life forever. I still follow her. I can't wait to meet her in person if ever she does an event and I can meet her. But she had been doing workshops on astrology where she did a new moon workshop and a full moon workshop. And I can't remember how I came about, I don't know how she came into my world. But I like to believe now, at least, that when you are looking for something, when you are in search of something, when you are really, really wanting the answers to something, it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's something inside of you, like me, whether it's something with your relationship and you're trying to fix something or heal something and figure yourself out, whether it's, I don't care what it is, but when you're really on the hunt, right, to look for the answers, you will get it. And it will almost always be in the most unlikely of places. And that's what happened to me. And so I discovered Chani and I'm reading her stuff and I'm like, astrology? God is really funny. God is hilarious. Like, I mean, I heard and I know that I'm an Aries. Okay, that means I was born in this time frame of the year, and I have a Team Aries, if you will. And I just remember going into the supermarket and waiting for my mom to do her shopping, and I would read the back of Oprah magazine and Elle and Essence and all the things, and I'm like, okay, but what does that mean? But it's like the perfect train wreck. You just can't stop looking because over time, it just made so much sense. And I thought, astrology though? Like, seriously? Why am I so enamored by it? Why am I taken under its spell, if you will? Like, why was it so fascinating to me? And it had been that it was the only thing that I had ever encountered that made sense, at least for me, that helped me to understand why the patterns of my life looked the way that they did. And so I went down the rabbit hole.
And what happened?
She's like, what happened next? I was like, oh no, you don't have any questions. And so essentially, I would buy Chani's new moon and full moon workshops, right? And so every 2 weeks she was putting out these workshops. And every time she did, I would learn a little bit more. And there's another golden nugget and another one and another one. And I just went off in the deep end. And I hadn't really told anyone. It wasn't even about that. Like, hey, everyone, this thing is happening. It was for me. And it was just the only time in my life that I actually sat down with myself. Like I made a post a few days ago on my Facebook and I asked something to the extent of when was a time in your life when you discovered that you liked your own company? And to my surprise, at least the people that answered, they had always been either loners or been the kind of people who just knew that they enjoyed their own company. And I thought, that wasn't me. I was such an extrovert. And so everything that I did was an outside influence. And so it was the first time in my life that I had ever actually taken the time to be by myself, right? I'm now a mom. And so what else are you going to do but figure yourself out in this new journey and your child, right? Because you're a new person now. But now astrology had just, come into my life and helped me to understand all of the patterns, why the stop and stop, why the push and pull, why I had, why my life had materialized in the way that it did. And over time, I had kind of discovered a kind of like a journey or what I would call like a GPS, if you will, because the birth chart had served like a GPS and a compass for my life. And I would just dig and dig. And I started to understand what the planets meant in the chart, what they were saying, what it means. Each planet has a job to do in your chart. And then I would go down the rabbit hole of understanding each and every one of them through historical context, because I just have this thing where I'm like, if I'm going to study something or read it, I want to understand all of the etymology, the historical and ancient wisdoms of all of it. That's just how I am. It's no wonder I was a sociology major. And so I was just reading and reading and reading. And so Chani was the first teacher. She still is. I have her app. It's religious for me to just every Sunday, 3:00, I get the update and then I'm just going down the rabbit hole. But either way, I had started to invest and I never even thought about it like that. I had always been a really great student, not by way of standard studying in high school or anything, or school overall, but I had always been a really great learner, right? Really interested in understanding things in a way that helped me to see the esoteric knowledge of something, the ancient knowledge of something, and astrology was no different. And so I learned about the planets, and then I learned about the 12 pieces of pie that we call the houses. And so each of those houses helps us to understand where the astrology is happening, right? Like, say, for example, we had just a new moon right now in Libra. And so you look at your chart and see where Libra is, and you would see where the activation was illuminating in your chart. And you would kind of, you know, figure out like, oh, Libra is this place for me. It's in the 12th, for me, it's in the 12th house. And so the 12th house is a place that's really hidden and behind the scenes and undercover, but it's also a place in which karma lives. And so, and healing can also happen. And I mentioned the 12th house because if you know anything about astrology, or even if you don't, you look at your 12th house and it can tell you a lot about healing. And that is how essentially the journey for me healing started. And so when I learned about the 12th houses, and then I got really good, and I started to see all of these little lines from one planet. For example, let's just your sun. I'm in Aries, right? So that means my sun in my chart is in the sign of Aries. And so I would see the sun, and it was shooting these lines to all of these different planets, and we call that aspects. And so I got really, really good by understanding that the sun is in relationship to other planets in your chart, and all the other planets are in aspect or in relationship to other planets. And so you can see the story unfolding in that way. And when I really saw it, when I started to really put the puzzle pieces together, not even, again, this is all inadvertently, just kind of like, you know, when you enjoy something and you're not doing it for money, you're not doing it for clout, if you will. This really was just me trying to understand myself. And when I looked at the 12th house is a place of deep healing, right? We call that the house of karma. It also has other names, the house of self-sabotage. But then also the 12th house talks to us about a place of isolation. And isolation by way of the deeper, darker places in our lives. And that's why there is a relationship of the 12th house to places like asylums, places like prisons, and places where there's not a lot of foot traffic, if you will. And so once I started to do the work of the 12th house and really understand what the planets of the 12th house was doing, my planets, I have 3 planets there. I have Mars, Saturn, and Pluto, right? Really deep shit if you really know a little bit about astrology. I started to understand where that start-stop energy was coming from. I have Libra in the 12th house. And so there's a relationship with all of the air signs, Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius, with our social circles. And so all of the air signs talk to us about social exchanges. And so there's a way in which the air signs, air waves, can help us to understand our relationships with other people by way of conversation, discourse, and relationships to each other. And so that just unfolded so many different things for me. There's a reason why I was overthinking, and I got it. And once I started to first understand it and then work with it, it's like, it was magic. It's like my life just became, I don't know, it's like I started to feel like my life was like a walking meditation. Like I could see the archetypes in a daily way. I could see the conversations that the universe was having with me by way of other people. I could see my relationship with my husband had taken a complete 180, or maybe 360. I don't know, whichever number works for you. And so my relationship with my husband got stronger. I use astrology to understand my children because each of them are different souls having a human experience, and they came through me. And I could see their temperaments. I look at their charts and I'm like, okay, I could see why my son is really great at math and my daughter isn't. And so because of that, I grew up in a house where my mother was always comparing me to other children, whether it be the other cousins or whatever. She just had this really terrible comparison syndrome. And I can see that it exists within her. And because of that, it then permeated into me. And that's something that I had to fight as well. And I use astrology to work on all of those things, right? To do really deep shadow work. And because of that, I'm a big advocate on how astrology can help you, and you can use astrology as a healing modality to do the deep work, to do the karma work, to do the ancestral family karmic work, because I believe that when we're looking, like, so we have this thing now where we're able to see DNA, and DNA tells a story. And you can see now through all of the 23andMe and all the other DNA companies where you can see the history and the lineage. Well, when we look at that, we can see the health of the family. We can see that certain diagnoses and certain struggles that we have with our health is something that is passed down. Astrology has the same way of us for us understanding, right? Certain personalities. And so when I talk about healing the family, karmic debt, if you will, healing the ancestral karma, learning that sometimes we carry things within us that's not even ours, right? That comes from a great, great, great grandfather. For whatever reason, there's a story that exists that you know nothing about. And now you're fighting these demons, if you will, that exist within you, because you don't even know that this is a storyline, that is something that, that's happened, hundreds of years ago, if you will. And so astrology can help us to really tap into that. If nothing else, it helps us to understand why we are, how we are, when we are. And I'm a big proponent to use astrology to, first of all, understanding your purpose here, and then understanding how you can live a life of authenticity that is outside of the crazy roller coaster now that we call internet and social media and the noise that we have constantly being bombarded by all the things, right? Healing the environmental conditioning of our lives, right? Having your mom tell you you're not going to amount to anything type of thing. That's because she's dealing with her own shit. And I'm understanding all the ways in which astrology is always here to help us to understand ourselves better and to get off the roller coaster of comparing ourselves, the self-sabotage that exists. At least that's how it started for me. And I think it's a beautiful practice, honestly, on a daily basis, to see like where the moon is, right? Why is it that we still have a relationship with the moon? Why do farmers still use it today? Why is there a relationship with women and our cycles and using the moon, right? It's so important. And when we look at the moon tells so many stories through women and our bodies. It tells stories of water, it tells stories of a ebb and flow that happens. It's a beautiful thing. And so I'm here to show the world. I made a promise to God that because I was able to find myself and find my purpose with astrology, that I would go out into the world and help others to do the same.
How is God connected to astrology?
So it's funny because when I was about 16 or 17,
I asked this because I was raised as a Jehovah's Witness, no longer.
yeah,
But Jehovah's Witnesses don't mess with astrology.
which is interesting.
It's viewed as satanistic.
Right.
So, and I have no idea. So I'm just asking, just for our viewers, and I'm curious.
So I hear this all the time, and not to me per se, but I see it, whether someone makes a viral post on a certain sign or whatever. And people always say that astrology is either satanic or witchcraft and all the things. And it's almost always someone that has a religious, not necessarily extremist, but a religious background. To which, if anything, at least for me, I found that astrology has helped me to get even closer to God. And I'll just use the Bible, for example, because this is one of my favorite stories, right? So when you look at the Bible tells you the story of how Jesus was discovered, how Jesus came to be. And the three wise men looked upon a great star, and they knew that that was a symbol that either a kingdom or a king was going to be created in some way. And so they followed, the three stars that they followed this great star that took them to Jesus, and took them to the town of Bethlehem. When we look at astrology is nothing more than an explanation of time, because that's literally what astrology is. It helps us to understand time by way of nature. And we know this because when we're looking at astrology follows first and foremost the sun, because the sun is the light, and then all the other planets' relationship in terms of their orbit to the sun. And so we have the sun, which is the biggest light, or our source of light, right? Our most natural source of light. And then you have the moon that orbits the earth and then also does not have its own light. And it goes from new moon to full moon, because the new moon means that it is, so if you can follow me, there's sun, moon, and then earth. And the way that we see the moon, because the moon doesn't orbit like how we have on earth, it's just one, we see only one face of the moon. And when it goes full, then it's sun, earth, moon. And so there's a relationship in how we are able to see that the moon has is a reflection of the sun. And when we see that, we can see that, there's something that wants to be, there's a story that wants to be told there, right? And so when we look at the light of the sun in reflection to, or the light of the moon in reflection with the sun, and all the planets orbits, I'm not going to take you down the rabbit hole and what it is that they do, we start to realize that there is a way in which, like, we have this thing with Mercury retrograde. As a matter of fact, we just got out of Mercury retrograde, right? So on the internet, it's like, oh my God, Mercury retrograde. Now, our exes are calling back and all the things, and my phone died. My phone got lost or broken and all the things or whatever. And we kind of make it superficial in that way. But if you actually sit down and you are doing what I call the walking meditation, which is you are in communion with nature. You pay attention to the sun and you start to see that the equinoxes and the solstices, they tell a story because they are beacons of time. They are markers of time in our year. And so we'll take fall because we just entered Libra, and Libra is the season that initiates us into fall. And you wonder to yourself, like, why is it called fall? When you look at fall, you'll notice that we're having less light, as if the sun's light has fallen, if you will. And then when we get into the winter solstice, that's another marker of time, because we've passed 3 months, which is Libra season, and then Scorpio season, and then Sagittarius season. After Sagittarius comes Capricorn, and we're in the dead of winter, or at least we're starting off winter. And then you'll notice that there is a relationship with the Son of God, and there's a constellation with the crux, which is also the sun, if you will. And you'll notice that if you pay attention to the story of Jesus and his resurrection and all the things, right? You'll notice that the constellation, if you just pay attention to that time of year and you follow that constellation, even if you don't have a telescope like I do, I put it away, but I'm like, even if you don't have a fancy telescope like I do, but if you follow the constellation, you'll notice that the sun rests in that constellation, just like the Son of God was crucified, right? We use the word crucifixion. That's why we call that we don't call the constellation because of that, but that's why the Son of God in and of itself is a relationship between the crucifixion in that story and the crucifixion where the sun goes into that constellation. And when we think about stories and how they've unfolded, whether you are Jehovah's Witness or me, I grew up Catholic, or my friends, who are Jewish, or any one of them, I don't care what religion you study, they all tell the same story. The names change, the I think that's probably about it. Just the names change. And so it's interesting to see the stories literally are so parallel, which all tells me that they all come from one source. But that source, if you look at the sky, tells the story. It's just language. Literally just language has changed. And so it's really interesting to see how we're fighting about the same thing, when all it is we're really just the same persons with just a different story. And if you follow astrology, and if you follow the constellations, and if you follow the stars, you'll see that the story is being told there. And so when I think, what source is at the hand of all of these things, it's just fascinating to me. And so if anything else, it helps me to understand that my world is so much bigger, and that what I thought I knew as God is so much more vast, so much more compassionate, so much more encompassing. And I see God in all the things. I see it in children. I see it in nature. I see it in, different situations that I'm in. And so it's fascinating to see God in that way. So, yeah.
Why do you think there's such a disconnect between people and astrology? Well, at least here, maybe not everywhere, but here in the US.
Anything that we don't understand, we fear, right? Why does racism exist? Because we don't understand it, right? We want to stay safe in what we know and what we have been taught. Because again, when someone tells us a story, right, we pass that on to our children, to our children's children, and so on and so forth. And so there's a way in which stories connect us. And so the person who tells the story has the upper hand because they can tell us whatever they want us to know and what they want us to believe. And so whoever is the, I forget, there's a quote on something about until the something tells the story, the lion will always be the victor, or something like that. And so whenever whoever, that's why storytelling is so incredibly powerful, whether it be in a book or the media or your Netflix account or whatever. But storytelling is so incredibly powerful because they help us to connect to a world that is outside of our own. And doesn't matter who the players are or the characters are in this book or in the story, but we tend to connect with that based on what it is that we know. And so I'm a big believer that depending on who the storyteller is, if they have chosen to tell the story from a place of truth, it helps us to connect to a deeper wisdom within ourselves. When I look at the Bible, right, I might ruffle some feathers, and that's okay. And I look at the Bible, it's written so many different times, but all the Bible is just is a bunch of stories, right? And I see so much astrology in the Bible. But what happens is it's easier to tell a story like Jesus existed and he died for our sins, because when you think about the guilt of someone doing something so big, like God crucified, had this happen so that you can live, you have a kind of, I don't know, like an ancestral guilt, if you will, by way of, if I don't do these things and if I don't stand in line, I'm not going to get to heaven. And when I think about those fear factors being ingrained in every single facet of our lives, by way of religion, by way of our family, by way of, institutions that we live in, there's always, I feel, an ingrained fear in the stories that are being told. Because I think, at least this is just me, I'm radical in that way, that when you give people their sovereignty and when you allow people to think for themselves, who wins? The person wins, because now we're able to see the light. But if you are able to keep people in fear, and if you're able to keep them thinking that this is the only way to get to heaven, by following these rules and not thinking outside of the box, it keeps us small. It's just like the way the United States education system was built. I believe it was Theodore Roosevelt who, God, I hope I'm not wrong, but either way, um, wanted to make sure that education was built in a way, at least in the United States, where we became a nation of workers and not a nation of thinkers. Because when you have too many people who can think for themselves, they can stretch the imagination, they can create really beautiful lives for themselves. But if you have a nation of workers and keep people in fear that they have to go out and either earn their own money or figure it out on their own, or have the power to create something that makes them feel alive and fruitful, and they're able to create generational freedom, then what happens to the nation? They don't get the piece of that pie, if you will. And so that's why we have a lot of people who are afraid to get into entrepreneurship, because they've been conditioned to believe that a job is safer. And we now know that COVID has proven that that's not true. So people have had to figure it out. And it's interesting that we have more entrepreneurs now than we've done before, because we've had to figure it out. And we're now starting to see that, of course it's scary, but so is going to work every day at a job that sucks, But I think that it really just boils down to storytelling and the person who writes the story keeping us in line, and then us on it. It's also conditioning, right? They believed it because we lived in a fear. Now we're going to pass that fear on because the brain wants to protect us. And so we're like, no, but this is what it is. And then you pass it on to your children. Then they live in a sort of kind of fear, and then they pass that on to their children. Yeah, I think that's what it boils down to.
Yeah. I love the thought of the ancestral, what did you say? Ancestral.
um, I don't know, ancestral
of
karma.
people
Yeah.
from the past
Yeah.
giving us, what is it called?
What is it? The DNA connection?
Yeah.
Um, something, I don't know. Like I think I mentioned something about seeing the ancestral patterns in our disposition, in our personalities, and
Yeah.
seeing it through the chart. We can see it through the DNA, but we can also see it through the birth chart as well.
Yeah,
Because when we look,
it reminds me of this story that I heard, like a scientific story about the mice with the cherry blossoms.
yeah.
Oh, you know it. Do you want to tell it?
Nope, I want you to tell it, and then I'll piggyback off of that.
Well, I don't know it exactly, but it was
No,
a
it's fine.
scientist or a university, probably like a Yale or something. I don't know. Did an experiment on mice
Yeah.
where every single time they would put like a scent or cherry blossom smell into the cage. And then every single time the smell would come, they would get shocked or something like that.
Yeah.
And then they did it for like a generation or two, like baby, mother, the grandparents, and then the parents. And then they didn't do it at all. No more shocking, just those two generations. And I might be exaggerating. Then they took away the shock, but they still would insert the cherry blossom smell as the babies, the new babies were coming, and the new babies would not go near the smell of the cherry blossoms because of the ancestral lineage of the shock that had hit the grandparents and the parents. And it was just a smell. There was there was never any shocking that happened to the little ones, but they still reacted the same exact way. Oh, you're frozen. So anyways, that to me was super, like totally hit me in, as far as understanding myself, understanding, just individuals just in general, as far as how they're reacting to life. Because a lot of times the fear or the triggers or the feelings that come up in us aren't even ours. They're, people, generations or ancestors, 2 or 3 times back sometimes. I'm kind of curious as to whether or not anybody else has ever heard of that, um, mice with the cherry blossoms before. And then you can easily Google it. It's yeah, like literally, if you just put mice cherry blossom, the thing will pop up. Hey,
Perfect. I
yeah,
don't know what's going on, but every once in a while, like my internet just freezes everything, and I'm like, I'm logged right in. I don't know what's going on, but
you
either way,
did
perfect.
that fast. You did that
Yeah,
fast.
I have my phone right now. I was like,
I
this
love it.
shine today. Okay. So
But that's similar to what you're talking about, right? So the
yeah,
mice with the cherry blossoms is very similar to what you're speaking of, as far as the ancestral lineage of fears or triggers or feelings that come up with us might not even be ours. It could be, grandparents, parents, and fear or, um, stresses that they had that are carried on through our DNA.
yeah. So there's a story that's similar where there is one with monkeys. Again, similar thing where there was a study done where there were monkeys that were given bananas, like there was a banana or something hanging from a tree. And so they would let like a few of the monkeys go up to the banana tree, get the bananas, or before they could get to the bananas, they would either experience a shock or they would get like some kind of beating or something. And then they would then go and retreat off into their, you know, not rooms, but their cages or whatever. And then the next day, the same thing. They would try to go get the bananas, but before they can make it, they would get penalized. Okay. This went on for so long that after a while, they would not go for the bananas, but then they replaced the monkeys and then they would put some new ones in. These new ones knew nothing about what was going on. They would go for the bananas, but the monkeys were like, no, and they would just beat them. Like, no, don't do this. And so they're like, what? What's going on? Like, why am I getting in trouble for this? It's bananas, free bananas, guys. Let's go get this. And so now the ones who were beating the new ones, they were replaced with new ones, with a new cohort. And so the ones who were like, man, I got my ass handed to me, I'm not going to do this, the new monkeys would then go to try to get the bananas. They would then get beaten. They're like, what is going on? Until it became generational. So now
Wow.
where the monkeys wouldn't even go for the bananas, but they would just, anyone that was entering that was new, that tried this new thing, they would get in trouble. And because of that, they knew not to touch it. And every time they replaced them, same thing would happen. These monkeys didn't know anything about getting beat because this was something happened generations ago. But for some reason, they would start to, like really hurt the other monkeys because they're like, no, this is what I heard. And this thing, I don't know what it is, but I don't want to get in trouble. And so I'm going to follow suit. I'm going to recreate the same patterns and habits because this is what I was taught. And so from that,
Wow.
blossoms. And so when we think about things existing in our DNA, it's
Yeah.
those patterns, right, that you're working on. And so for me, um, it was trying to figure out that stop and start, that constant start and stop, and that fear of actually doing the thing. And so I even noticed this. So I went back and I was like, man, so where has this pattern existed before? And I realized that at every single job that I had, even though I would do really well, I did really well with customer service because everything is relationships, and I would do really well with the work in and of itself. But if they were ready for me to get promoted and go into a managerial position, I'm like, can't do it. I didn't feel like I was good enough to be a manager, right? I didn't feel like I was good enough to handle those kinds of responsibilities and all of that people stuff, right? I'm good at people, but for some reason I didn't feel like I was good at the systems of people. And so I remember being at a doctor's office and I was in my early 20s and they wanted to promote me within a year and I'm like, no, I'm good right here. I was working for Enterprise, same thing. Every other job that I've had, always a managerial position. And so I had to ask myself, like, what is that? Like, why is that? And it really took some digging deep, right? And really asking the myself the tough question and facing myself in the mirror type of thing. And asking, why is it that I was scared of going into managerial positions? And so I thought to myself that I told myself the story that if I were a manager, that I would fuck people up. I would mess something up. What if I messed up the schedule? What if I don't know, what if I'm short staffed and I'm overwhelmed? Or what if and I didn't want to deal with the responsibilities of the systems of people. And so I just talked myself out of the of anything when it came to responsibility. Well, what happens after a while is the thing that you're running away from is likely the thing that you're needing to work on. And so now here I am responsible for a whole person and then people after that, because I have 5 now. And the very thing that I didn't want to do, which is manage people, I'm fucking living it.
I love
But
it.
like, and I wish I had it here, but now I have like a whole management system and I'm like, okay, who does what, when does this get done, family shopping for the groceries and meal planning and meal prepping. I'm like, man, if I picked up the managerial position, I would have killed it, right? But now here I am learning on the job, aka being a mom, and it's like, look at
Yeah.
that. Look at that.
Yes.
Hilarious.
Yes. Yes. I love it when I hear moms that get that. There's a woman that's really close to us in the Her Nation community, Erica Hall, and she talks about different vocations as far as um, women and all the things that we have to do as far as the roles of being an entrepreneur, a boss, being a mom, being a wife, being a caregiver. And there's roles or there's systems that you have in each arena. In each arena, you are the boss.
Yes, Um,
And a lot of times people don't acknowledge that. And that's where sometimes the misstep is, there's total chaos or overwhelm, but that's because no one's taking the leadership role.
yeah, I think that we glamorize the idea of motherhood with this. I don't know. It's like, oh, it's soft and we're nurturing. And yeah, that's it. But it's also, you're a fucking CEO of a house, of a
Yeah,
person. You're literally the,
exactly.
and in order to be a great CEO, it takes many different skill sets, right? Yes, you're
Yeah.
nurturing. That may not even come natural to you, right? So then there's that. Make sure that
Yeah.
you're nurturing in that way that helps your child feel seen and all the and then there's always a micro and macro to each of those skill sets. Then there's
Yeah.
the that make that happen, right? So you got to make sure that your kid eats. What does that look like for you? Whether you're meal planning and doing the thing throughout the week, whether you're creating a master grocery list, which I just did, right? And learning how to do that and make sure that I do it, in a way that fits my family and my goals and how it is that we eat. And there are systems of self-care, like like what happens when they're fighting. How do you handle that? How do you eat? Like I have this thing with my kids where, this is the Libra side again, where I tell my kids, all right, kids, you know that I love for everybody to get their equal. I'll tell a quick story. So my daughter comes home one day, and I send them to their grandmother every like month, at least once or twice or whatever in a month. And when my daughter was telling me yesterday, she goes, oh, Gun, we're Haitian, so grandmother means Gun. She goes, well, Gun asked who's the leader of the house. And I go, so what'd you say? And she said, well, she says, well, I used to be the leader, but now mom gave it to Ezra. And I said, well, what did she say? She says, oh, why would she do that? Leader. And my daughter goes, I don't know. I was like, you do know, because we talk about this every time. Remember, I told you, what does mom say that, what does mom do? You are, what's that word again? It starts with an E. I said, let's say it again. Mom is an egalitarian. Like, yeah, equal. You like, and I said, there you go. I didn't take the role of leader from you. I don't believe that children should be, not because of anything, but just because they'll like really be like a terror, right? So I'm a big believer that each child has their own unique set of gifts. My
I love
daughter,
that.
I'm big on that. My daughter has this thing where she wants to be the leader of the kids. And I tell her that that's not right. I don't believe that that's right. And you shouldn't do that. And I don't allow you to do that, because I don't want them to grow up with a kind of inferior complex or anything like that. And I want them to each get their ability to shine. And so we would walk around the neighborhood so that they can understand directions. And every time I would say, okay, today, Ezra, you take us home. And so he'll take me home. But I would notice that he's better with directions than she is. And then I'll say, Sabby, okay, you take me home. And of course, she would try her best and whatnot. And everybody's always trying to fight to be a leader. But my goal with that is that I want them to feel seen and to
Yeah.
feel to not do what I did, which is shying away from leadership positions. And so I give
Wow.
each ability to lead. And so my mom, who doesn't understand it, kind of old school type of thing, doesn't understand it. She's like, well, you're the oldest. And so Caribbean moms are all, you're the oldest, so you're in charge. I'm like, but yeah, just because she's older doesn't mean that she has the particular skill sets to lead. But in
Yeah.
also, I want how to get their shine so that they can understand what it means to lead. I want my boys to know how to lead. I want my girls to know how to lead, and where it is that it falls for them when they get older is where it falls. But at least they would have gotten a little bit of that experience as children, so that they're not like, oh my God, I don't want to be a leader and I can't, because you're going to be called to do something great in your
Yeah.
life. Shying away from
Yeah.
that, you're going to be 30 years old, like, what the hell's wrong with me? And I'm like, no, that starts here. So I'm big on that.
I love that. I love that. And what a great example of taking our own story and making sure that we're evolving in a way where our children are better off because of our own story instead
Yeah.
of repeating it.
Oh
Instead of
yeah.
repeating it.
No, I'm like, nope, we're not going to
I
live in
love
that.
it.
Nothing else. We're breaking generational curses, even with just to
Yeah.
something like that. So yeah.
Yeah. I love that. That's so awesome. I want to give a quick shout out to those that are hanging out live with us. Thank you so much for being here and hanging out with us. Those watching on the replay, make sure you hashtag replay wherever you are, even if it's a couple days later, so that we can shoot you some love and see where you were watching us at. But I want to ask, Wilda, what do you do for all the humans? Do you do any work in the astrology arena? Can we, link up with you? Are you on social media? How does everyone get a hold of you, and what do you do?
Yeah, so I'm undergoing a total rebrand process. So the website's down, and you'll notice that my Instagram is completely blank, but my stores are still popping, right? And how I serve the humans. I used to teach entrepreneurs and coaches how to use astrology to align with their businesses and their business goals. But I've been called to do more of the healing work. And so I'm a big believer that I was able to work on my self sabotage with astrology. And so I'm going back to the roots of my foundation when it comes to astrology. And so I'm big on, if you are healing the self-sabotage and you are addressing the imposter syndrome, that it won't show up in your business. So if we do this work first, then the business will thrive because you've done the work, right? And it won't show up. We all work with, we all deal with the things. I mean, Oprah still has teachers, and all the greats still have teachers. I'm sure that Tony Robbins has, right? But if you are working on the imposter syndrome, if you're working on the self sabotage, if you're working on the patterns like I did, then it won't show up in your business. And when it doesn't show in your business, you are able to serve in a way that feels really, really satiating to your soul. And you're able to do work that is, that's for you. So if you want to link up with me, Instagram is the best way to do that right now. And you can reach me at just like the handle. It's at Wilda Previl on all the platforms. And I look forward to serving you and to helping you to heal with the stars.
I love it. Why do you do what you do?
Because I don't want anyone else to play small. I have this thing where I feel like I am the word pioneering, but it's funny because I'm like, no, that's not the word, but maybe it is. I want to pioneer an age of leaders that are authentic, that are living in their purpose. I don't want them to question ever again whether what they're doing is truly for them. I believe that we can make all the monies, but it's not usually about money. It is about purpose. That when you are in purpose, you can be a clown, right? But because there's something in your calling that says you're meant to make people laugh, and you do so in a way and energetically, all the resources and all monies will come to you. So I am really, really big on using astrology to help you to find what that is. It may take some work, but if so long as you're willing to do the work, I can promise you that the life that you want, the life that you've dreamed of, is yours.
Fantastic. Absolutely. I love that. What's your big goal
Yeah, I'm big on that.
for your
Astrology is
community?
just, it's fascinating. It's, yeah, yeah.
Uh,
I feel like
we're,
I've done the work and I see my, can you hear
we're,
me?
we're, there's a delay.
Okay, cool. Okay.
There's a delay.
Yeah.
That's absolutely fantastic, though. I love everything that you do. I'm so excited to have you here on screen, and I could easily see how we could go down a rabbit hole of like all the questions with all of the things. So for those of you that are here listening in, that are loving all the goodness that Wilda is sharing, make sure you link up with her. So you can drop into her DMs on Instagram, and she'll have her website and all that stuff connected ASAP for everybody. We're all about connecting here on the in her nation, and this is one of the ways that we connect is through podcasting and getting to know the females in our community just a little bit more, because we all have things that we're sharing with the world that we're good at. And one of the best ways to connect with like-minded individuals is to give them a platform to be able to speak and share some of their story. So thank you, Wilda, for being here. For those watching here on her version, thank you so much. This community is expanding every single day and is filled with females who are striving to do better than they did yesterday. For those of you that are new to this podcast, make sure you like and subscribe. If you have a story to share, make sure to reach out to me here or at hernation.life. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria, and I'm so grateful to be here sharing a platform that allows people to share their truth and inspire others.